गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गणेश शॉट। गणेश शॉट में आप सबका स्वागत है। टुडे वी गोना टॉक ऑफ साइनिसिज्म ऑफ बुद्धिज्म एंड Chinese geopolitics. Why do we need to talk of this subject? That's the point which we have to consider. We have to talk of this now because China has embarked on a very clear path of Sinicism of Buddhism in order to secure Tibet. Their goal is to ensure that Tibet remains within China and is never a problem for them. And that is why they're very serious about it. That's the first point. The second point is, of course, that the Dalai Lama is getting on in age, right? And they're looking at, why everyone is looking at a life after Dalai Lama or Tibet after Dalai Lama. What happens next? And these two questions will define the geopolitics of not only China, but a lot about India and Tibet, India and China. So in this context, I thought, let me put across to everyone, what are the trend lines which are emerging? What are the issues which are emerging? And how do we tackle them? Because I'm going to pose more questions than answers today in this episode. So, right. The first thing is, of course, we have to understand Tibet is with China. And 90% of any argument is possession. We all know it's illegal occupation. We need to understand that, well, China has it, you have to dispossess it. How do you do it? So far, no one has been successful for many reasons. Why will it be feasible hereafter? So that's the fundamental thing. And we have to also understand very clearly what are China's interests in it today, what are China's interests in it tomorrow. Because it's based on those interests that China will either hold on to Tibet or will be able to give it away or will agree to dilute its stake in Tibet. So once you understand that, then you'll realize that it's going to be very difficult. Okay, let's go at it. What are the interests in Tibet? These are the interests. I've just enumerated them. I'll explain to them one by one. Yeah, China considers Tibet as an inalienable part of China. And, you have to understand this bit. Xinjiang and Tibet, they're two different entities. Now, these two different entities have always been central, to the fact that they consider both these entities are part of China and inalienable. But these two entities are divided by a set of mountain ranges. If you look at it as the Pamirs, they expand. You have the Himalayas, the Karakoram, the Kunlun, and the Tien Shan. The Kunlun effectively divides Xinjiang from Tibet. Anyone who has to control Xinjiang or Tibet have to control it from the rear. So they need a forward access, a communication link. And Tibet provides that communication link to Xinjiang and vice versa through Aksai Chin. This is the link. So to that extent, to maintain the territorial integrity of a China which comprises of Xinjiang and Tibet, this entire area is, invaluable to them. And they're not going to let go of this area in a hurry. I mean, whatever we might think, they're not going to happen. Additionally, Xinjiang is the place from where the second leg of the CPEC is to come through the Shaksgam Valley. But that's a different story. So Tibet is the link. And of course, don't forget, you cross Tibet, you cross the Karakoram Pass, you get into the westernmost region of Xinjiang. It borders Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. So it becomes a very critical area. And the link to that critical area through Tibet is through Aksai Chin. And so they're not going to let this area go in a hurry. Okay. Then, of course, Tibet is the platform from which China can suppress India. It can threaten the chicken snake, as I've shown it in this, viewfoil, and it also lays claim. It also lays claim to Arunachal Pradesh through Tawang, and Tawang being the center from where the sixth Dalai Lama was born. So these areas upset India when claims from China come on Arunachal Pradesh as South Tibet, and it threatens the chicken snake through the Doklam area. India is upset. And upsetting India means that it can be suppressed. That's the way of going about doing things. So Tibet is very important from that point of view, and it's a platform for suppressing India. The next point, of course, Tibet is the water tower of Asia. China has two main rivers, Huanghe, the Yellow River, and Yangtze, which is the main industrial river on which the Three Gorges Dam is there, the Wuhan Industrial Complex is there, and the head is, or the mouth of the river as it goes into the Pacific, is the megapolis of Shanghai, right? These two rivers emanate from Tibet. So who controls Tibet? Controls China. And China is a water deficient country. And who controls Tibet also controls water going into India and the East Asia. The East Asian rivers of Mekong and Salween, which affect Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, India, Myanmar. They all are from Tibet, and that control is important. And that's what this map, which is basically a Chinese map, depicts. Then, of course, recently there have been a lot of minerals found in Tibet historically, but now a lot of copper has been found. So it's an economic bonanza for China, and they'll never let go of it for these reasons. Right. And of course, we all know of the dam in the Great Bend, which is now being contemplated, which will become critical for China's energy and water security. So if you take these issues into consideration, Tibet is very critical for China and its future. So will it let it go? No. If it will not let it go, what is the answer? Do we have a method of taking it out? That's what we have to understand. While we might not have a method of sorting it out, China has thought about it some time back. It's because it's critical to their interests. So what is it? And that process is called Sinicization of Buddhism. Why Sinicization of Buddhism? If Buddhism is Sinic in nature, and Buddhism is converted from being a religion independent of China to a religion which is subservient of China, then their temporal control over Tibet is full. And once the temporal control and the spiritual control of Tibet is established, well, then there's nothing left in this whole game. So when did they start this? You have to understand when did this Sinicization of Tibet start? It started 2 years back in the 20th Party Congress, right? It was Xi Jinping who said we need, just around the time October 22, okay? He said, I would like to Sinicize Tibet. And as an extension of Sinicizing Tibet, it is Sinicization of Buddhism. And that started in 22. So what did it involve? What does it involve? It involves incorporating the Chinese CCP and Xi Jinping thought into Buddhism, and put it into Tibet. Okay. Then I wouldn't have even spoken to you about this or not discussed this. But the fact is that this article triggered it. This article came in China Daily a few days back. And it said, look, what is China doing here? They're talking of secularism of Buddhism through Sinicization. And they examined it in this whole article. They say, I mean, their new narrative is coming out. What is the new narrative? It's mentioned in this article. It says traditional Chinese Confucianism and Taoism is the background of development of Buddhism in China. So Buddhism is developed based on Confucianism and Taoism. It sounds a little funny that Buddhism, is based on Taoism and Confucianism, whereas in actual fact, Buddhism displaced Taoism and Confucianism wherever it went. But then changing the narrative. Okay, is that all? He says, no, between Chinese Mahayana and Indian Mahayana, the relationship is a creative transformation and innovative development. Leave everything aside. This is the first time I'm hearing something called Chinese Mahayana. Very interesting. So there's a new, a communist party is now developing a new religion called the Chinese Mahayana form of Buddhism. Sinicization. This is what it is. And that is being projected all over in media. And this is available to us on a website. So they're building a case. Those who have to read it will read it. Those who react will react. If it doesn't react, they built up a case. Slowly it's pervading. And this article also talks of Sinicization of Buddhism. He says Chinese Buddhism is not only a local transformation of religious civilization from overseas, but a rediffusion to South Asia and Southeast Asia. This is again very interesting. So first and foremost, you see these three connects. He says first, Buddhism is based on Taoism and Confucianism. He says that's the base. Buddhism is not an original religion. Then he's introduced the concept of Chinese Mahayana. Okay, and that's a creative and transformation and innovative development which has happened, new religion. Okay, and then he says this transformation of religious civilization is, it emanates from China and goes into East Asia and Southeast Asia. Buddhism, as per this story, hasn't gone across the seas into, Cambodia or Thailand or Japan or South Korea and all that. It's come through China. So it's based on Taoism, it's based on Confucianism, it's Chinese Mahayana, and Buddhism has spread into other parts from China. So this is a new narrative. This is Sinicization of Buddhism, and which means that this Sinicized Buddhism is the fundamental of Buddhism in Tibet. So Tibet is part of China. The cultural and the spiritual entrapment of China is on. So it's not only that. I saw this post, the Kathmandu post. A very interesting article. It says the great game in the Himalayas. So what's the great game in the Himalayas as per him? Some time back, China started this park in Lumbini, birthplace of Buddha. Okay. And there are after all, Buddhism has its socio-cultural linkages. And those socio-cultural and religious linkages have socio-political leverage. Always. Any religion gives political leverage, just like in Islam or even in Hinduism. So Buddhism is now, as per this article, which is right also, it's a tool for a political leverage. Right? And Buddhism is influencing the West. A lot of people in the West are now taking on Buddhism. So Lumbini has given China a political opportunity, and they've invested a lot of money in it A lot of work has been on in recreating Lumbini under Chinese with Chinese characteristics. So it's not only there, they're dabbling in recreating Buddhism or the Chinese Buddhism in Lumbini, which is the birthplace of Buddha. Okay. And rightly, this author says Lumbini provides China with a political opportunity. Absolutely right. And they're exploiting it. And part of it, not only political opportunity, it's a geopolitical opportunity. Now, China's ambitious plan in Lumbini is aimed to establish China as the natural and undisputed leader of the Buddhist world, not India, China. Just with Lumbini. I mean, all this discounts the fact that you have Sarnath, you have Varanasi, you have the Sanchi Stupa and Bhopal, and all the viharas all over India. I mean, those are irrelevant for those of you who've been there. But Lumbini, the moment China has Lumbini, so slowly Buddhism has become a Chinese religion. Okay, so all this is why it gives the leverage to China to nominate the next Dalai Lama. The moment the next Dalai Lama is in their hands, the Panchan Lama is already in their hands. There's a fake Panchaman Lama. The Panchan Lama nominated by the Dalai Lama is missing. So political leverage is there for Tibet. They'll consolidate their hold over Tibet. And this is the whole story. China's national security in Tibet should not be questioned, or China's natural claim to Tibet should not be questioned. And it is now being done religiously. It's not military, it's not political, it is not communism. It is just that communism is now giving birth to a new religion called Buddhist or Chinese Mahayana Sinicized Buddhism. Understand this. Okay, so what are they doing then? There is a spate of articles which have come out. In that, it said China has a natural say in choosing the next Dalai Lama. They already started talking of it. And they are holding conferences on this. What are we doing? There's no talk. Hardly anything. Now, Xi Jinping has started visiting Tibetan temples, basically in Western China. That is northern Tibet. And he's calling for ethnic unity and unity of Tibetans with, with Uyghurs, unity of Tibetans with Chinese, and the Hans, especially in Yunnan. So he's talking of all that as part of Sinicization. And in the part of that, he's giving feelers to their leaders, join China completely. And he's also subverting the Tibetan monks. Well, as far as subversion is concerned, if Tibet is today part of China, it is because the Chinese Communist Party has traditionally infiltrated the Tibetan Buddhists and the society and their hierarchy and the temporal authority of Dalai Lama, not now from 1950. That is how Tibet fell. And now they're cementing it. So the space for the Tibetans or the Tibetan Buddhism or the Dalai Lama based Tibetan Buddhism is being squeezed out. And it'll be completely squeezed out when the new Dalai Lama, a new Dalai Lama is nominated in China by China. In China, I'm not talking of Tibet. They'll get a Dalai Lama from China and say he's a Dalai Lama. Of course, there will be a problem, but we'll come to that. Then, of course, Wang Huning, who's supposed to be the ideological guru of the Communist Party at this point of time. Right? He's also gone to an exhibition on the reincarnation of Dalai Lama. I just think they already, one chap says we have a right to renominate. Now they're proving through exhibitions and some fabricated history as to how Dalai Lama will get reincarnated in China. That the narrative is being set. Okay, and then anyone who talks of this gets sanctioned. They've done it to Canadian institutes over Tibet and Xinjiang rows. So anyone who now talks against China about Tibet or Xinjiang gets sanctioned. So there's a punitive measure also which is started. So you see the lines of operation. There's an internal control, there's an external control, there's also external narrative which is being spread. Okay, and then now from very recently they don't talk of Tibet as Tibet but as Xinjiang. They've issued a white paper for it. That's the point. I tried to find the white paper, I couldn't find the white paper. So one day they'll come out with it from somewhere and say, look, we've published a white paper long back. If anyone finds this white paper on Tibet or Xinjiang, please forward it to me for me to analyze. And after the recent earthquake in Shigatse, obviously the damage there was much more than what it was. They didn't allow any Tibetan monk to enter that area, lest the truth comes out. And they've effectively cordoned off the information flow from Xinjiang or the Shigatse. So there is a clear plan on the part of China of Sinicizing Buddhism and taking the whole thing forward, so that when Dalai Lama goes, they have an alternate Dalai Lama in place. He is put in place, and thereafter the Tibet question will be deemed to be settled. Because then he'll say, I'm part of China, I'm not part of India, or Tibet has never been independent, nothing. They're already preparing for his reincarnation. They're already preparing for a communist-backed religious change of Buddhism. Right? Now, in this, you saw the US lawmakers who came in August. Nancy Pelosi came, met Dalai Lama, met our Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, and then USA has passed this Tibet Policy Bill and Tibet Resolution Act. But what good use is it? That's then. After that, what? Why have I said this? I'm trying to put out the thing. Will Tibet or Tibetan authorities or the Central Tibet Authority start reacting? Will India start reacting? Will USA start reacting? Or acting on what China is doing? China has taken a start on this. It's not now, 2 years back. Over and above that, you see, as part of the border villages they're settling, as part of the LAC infrastructure. Then I'm not talking of the other things like infrastructure coming, money being splashed and subversion and all that. Today we're just talking of Sinification of Buddhism and how China is going about its geopolitics. There are other issues. The issue is China has started acting. India, Tibet, and USA, the other three main players in this game, are yet to come out with a policy. It's possible that the whole thing might turn in some direction, which we don't even understand. But this is the fact of the case at this point of time. And I feel that China has taken a lead, and it's time for us to come out with a policy. Otherwise, we will be just reacting to the situation when it happens. Look, even, I wish the Holy Highness Dalai Lama the best of health and the longest of lives. But the longer he lives, you'll see this flavor of Sinicization of Buddhism, and Buddhism being converted into a Chinese religion gaining more traction. This has happened in 2 years. Let's see what is going to happen ahead. And I've finished here. I'm going to take a few questions. I'll be a little brief. Like I told you, I'm in between meetings and conferences. Today I spoke to about 30, 40 officers, commanders and commanding officers from the LAC on my views about China, but that's a different story. So today evening I have something else. So I thought wherever I get time, an hour or so or 45 minutes, I'll come up with this small podcast. Okay. I'll take a few questions.